Now you will see the difference from a investor PowerPoint where they have like a graphics department and me who did this yesterday. They actually emailed me today asking, I think there's a conversion error in your slides. I think the format is wrong. I just had to answer, no, it has to look that way. So it's on purpose. Okay, just have to find the first slide. Perfect. My presentation is basically in 3 parts. I'll give you a very brief introduction to me and what we do in my company. Then I'll go through some of the thoughts we had. Why are we selling to SMEs, as Nicolaj said? So why are we doing that? Why are we starting there? And what are like the foundations? What do you have to think about before you actually start executing your strategy? And then I'll spend most of the time actually talking about what we do. And that's a very hands-on, step-by-step process, which is probably not perfect, probably not right for all of you, but that's just the very honest version of what we do and what works, and also something that didn't work in our company. My background is that I've started another company a couple of years ago with my co-founder, Lars, the beautiful guy over there. We actually went bankrupt in 2017, despite a couple of years with rapid growth. But in the end, we basically scaled before we really had product market fit. So one learning. And the second learning was that customers do not always pay on time, especially smaller ones. And we had, in the end, more than 1,000 customers who didn't pay on time. So that was like pushing us over the edge in terms of cash flow. And that's very shortly, that's basically what we solved with my current company, Likvido. So we have built like what we call an invoice CRM. So we automate the entire process of accounts receivables, so checking who has paid, sending out late payment reminders, integrating to debt collection. We automate that flow, and then we offer them financing and credit insurance on top of that. We started the company in February. Now we have more than 1,150 customers. So we've been quite good at actually getting the product out and getting customers to use it, and they're quite happy with using it. So some of the stuff I'm going to tell you actually has worked for us. In terms of revenue, we're at almost 50,000 euro monthly revenue now. So we've actually also been able to charge some money from these customers. That's actually the only thing I want to say about us and what we do. A very brief introduction to our sales funnel, which I'll come back to in much more details, is that we are focusing on the smaller companies. So that's like mice or deers or what you want to call it. We actually started by also going for enterprise. So I spent my time having meetings with some banks and insurance companies. Then we also tried to go for smaller SMEs. And I think that's the worst thing you can do. You really have to focus in the beginning because you don't have like the time, energy to do both. So I think one very important decision is really to narrow down and start with one segment in the market. So the process we have today is we go for very small companies. They are typically, and I'll come back to some ideas behind it, but we go for companies with 5 to 15, 25 employees. In our case, that's and the decision maker there is most often the owner of the company. He does the bookkeeping, he has the pain, he does the process we automate, he does that himself. So you can really relate to it. Then we have a team of SDRs, so sales development representatives. So they book demos. They sit on the phone and they cold call these companies, do some market research and book demos. Then we have another team of key account managers who then onboard them to the product and convert them to paying customers. And then we have a customer success team who then takes care that these customers stay happy with the product. So these are basically our 3 functions. And I'll come back to in more detail why and how we do that. But step 1 is actually before you start going in the market and doing anything is really to sit down and think a couple of concepts through. So the first thing, and now I've added these boxes with a lot of text. Don't actually look at the text. I hope you can get the slides afterwards. So these are just basically exercises that are really good to go through. But step 1 is really to identify what is called who's your ICP, so ideal customer profile. And the ideal customer profile should not be the perfect customers in 5 years. It should really be the Mr. Perfect right now. So who is the customer or the customer segment right now with the highest success percentage for you? Who's easiest to attract? That has been our approach. So not who would be the perfect customer for us at some point and where could we make most money. We actually looked for who's Mr. Perfect right now, who can we within a couple of weeks call, sell, get feedback to our product. So our whole mindset has been we have to launch this as soon as possible. We have to get feedback because else we don't know if we're building the right thing. And that's the beautiful thing with going for smaller SMEs, small companies, is that you can launch something, you can get it out in the market very quick, and then you can get feedback. So the first thing is really looking at who is your ideal customer profile. And in our case, that's something that's basically companies where the owner does the invoicing, dunning, reconciliation himself, because then he spends his weekends and evenings on it. It's a very short decision process. He has a lot of invoices, so he is in industries where they send a lot of invoices. So you can really look at which segments, which type of customers have the pain, where's the pain strongest, and how can you then identify like these customer segments. So that's step one, because if you're not really clear about who is your perfect customer, then you're gonna waste a lot of money, and you're not gonna be like really targeted in your messaging, because there's a big difference in how you should address a pain and your value proposition depending on who the customer is. So that's basically step one. Step two is then to really look at who's taking the decision. That's very easy if you go for the smaller customers as we do, but still there we have the owner who's actually we go for the owner who's using our product. He's also the buyer. So with small companies, it's most often the same guy who uses the product takes the decision. But then we actually have bookkeepers who are like influencers, sometimes users who say, okay, but Likvido actually it automates the process I'm charging the company for, which is not that good for the bookkeeper always. So you really have to look at which people are buying the product, who's using it, who's influencing it, and then for all of these, really defining how does this buyer profile look like. I'm not going to spend that much time on these slides. It's really just a very brief, but these are some of the thoughts you should do before you actually go to market. So in our case, we define this is the bookkeeper Jytte. She looks like that. She sees X Factor. She drinks coffee and eats chocolate. This is the owner. He watches House of Cards and Billions and loves to travel and read books. So really define who are these people, how are they thinking, what are they interested in, how should we communicate to these people. And that's quite important before you start approaching them. Last thing here is really then to think about what are the pains, because you have to sell a product or a solution based on a pain. And people need to understand these pains. And that's, in our product, for instance, that's not that easy, because we sell a new category. We are automating the accounts receivables process. No SME knows what that is. We're an invoice CRM. Nobody knows what that is too. So you really have to figure out which are like the pain points. In our case, a pain is that last year you had 2 customers who went bankrupt before they paid their invoice to you. You lost 50,000 K. That's a pain we can talk about. Another pain is that you spend your evenings checking your bank statement, doing reconciliation in your book and doing bookkeeping. You hate to do that. You spend time on it. That's a pain. But really think about these pains with words that your customers understand. And especially these small SMEs, they often actually don't know their pains. And I think that's one difference if you go to larger companies. Maybe they know what an invoice CRM is, or they have a team responsible for managing accounts receivable, so they know these words, they know what they want. These smaller SMEs, they don't know what they want. So you really have to be good at asking questions and identifying the pains, and then making these pains clear to your customers, especially if you come with a new software product or something, because it's not obvious for them that they have a pain. And if they don't agree on the pain, they will never buy the solution. So basically what we did is we mapped out for all these stakeholders which jobs, which pains do they have, could we solve that, how well could we solve that, and which customers want that the most. Back to identifying who is that ICP we have to go for. Then we basically defined like a conversation framework, so how should we talk with these people, which is really about asking questions. So which questions can we ask to identify the problem, the situation they are in, the problem they have, how can we make that problem clear to them? So really before before you go to market, really sit down and ask these questions. Basically, which statements should your customers agree on before they ever will consider your solution? And this is basically a spin, the classic spin selling process. But really to spend some hours together with the team and the people who should call potential customers and work on marketing and work through some of these exercises, that has helped us a lot. So that was like the theory and what you should do, or what we did before we really started, and we started, then we figured out this is not working, then we did some of the exercises, then we went back. So it's not like you do one thing, then the next, but it's a good idea to think strategically about who's the ideal customer profile, which pains do they have, which questions should we ask to identify these pains, and again, who's not the perfect customer for us in 5 years, but who is Mr. Perfect right now? Because it's all about really getting traction, getting feedback, so you can optimize your product, and if you're like raising capital, to be able to raise the next round. Next. Maybe I should put my phone over here. I'll guess it's the phone. Next part is actually what we do today and how we've implemented it. So this is very hands-on. The first thing we do is we create targeted lists, because we need to figure out who should we call, who should we do marketing with, and who are these companies. So we use a tool called Vinu. There are a lot of great tools here. There's also Lasso, is also Danish. There's the old NN Market Data. There are a lot of tools that let you build very segmented lists based on, in Denmark, CVR, so the company register. But most countries have like tools where you can build lists. And you can build lists based on everything. So this list is like rental and leasing, or companies in that industry with renting and leasing. But we could also say they should have this number of employees. They should have that amount of revenue. They should have 2 people on the board. So you can really build these targeted lists. And then over time, actually go back and look at the customers you're converting. Then you can upload them to a tool like this. So now we have 1,150 customers. We can upload them to this tool. And then we can see the customers we have today, which profiles and which industries are they in. How many employees are there? When were they founded? Stuff like that. So you really narrow down like your customer list. But step 1 is just to build a list of potential customers. Step 2 is, or in our case, the next step was actually to do prospecting. So we use a tool called Hunter, and then we have 2 freelancers working remote in a country where salaries are very low. So for 100,000 companies on our list, we found their email address. Because you're not allowed basically to send them an email, so we're not doing that. But what we do when we have an email, we upload them to Facebook and to LinkedIn and to Google and to all the platforms where you can do custom audiences. Because then you can basically run ads very specific, targeting these customers. Because for us it's very hard. We can't really go to Facebook and say now we want to reach companies with 5 employees who were started in 2017 and who are in that industry. But in this way, we actually can do it. And we can do it on Facebook, we can do it on LinkedIn, we can do it on display, we can do it on YouTube. And then we basically run campaigns with testimonials from that industry. So if you're in renting and leasing, which was like the industry I showed you before, we'll find your email, we build a custom audience on Facebook, and then you will see a testimonial video with another client of ours who's talking from your industry. So it's very, very relevant. And if you do it in that way, it's not that expensive. Second step is then actually to build lookalikes, because Facebook can look at the customers in your audience, and then they can find people on Facebook who are very similar to that. So you can say, if you have this custom audience, you can say now, show this ad to the 1% of people in Denmark who match or who look like the group you've built. So in that way you can get broader groups. And then you can do retargeting. So all people then actually clicking on something, going to our website, they will see the same ads again. So this is the very brief version actually of our marketing stack. So we don't spend that much money on AdWords. We do a bit, but it's actually not working. It's very expensive. For us, it's really about identifying 100,000 or smaller lists of potential customers, segmenting them into industries, finding emails, building audiences, and then really showing extremely relevant ads for them. Next thing we do is that we have a team of SDRs, which I briefly talked about. So these are young people, part-time workers, who come in for a couple of hours a day or week, and then they sit in this system, which is a phone dialer, and then they call these companies. So they will have, on a daily basis, maybe 200 calls, 200 conversations. And now we have 8 people having 200 conversations a day, a lot of conversations with these potential customers. Some of them actually know us because they have seen our ads on Facebook, LinkedIn, Google, stuff like that. Most of them don't. But so it's a conversation where we call them, say, hey, you're talking with Max from Likvido. And then we ask them a couple of questions. Back to like the conversation framework, because now it's really about asking questions and seeing, okay, is this customer a potential match for our platform? Because not all we don't want to talk with all companies. We want to talk with companies who use specific accounting software, who sell on credit, who have 100 or more invoices a month, and who agree on some pains. So they will ask questions like, have you ever experienced a company not paying you on time? Yeah, I have. Have you ever had a company going bankrupt before they could pay you? Who's doing your bookkeeping? Oh, I'm doing that in the weekends. Oh, do you like doing bookkeeping in the weekends? No, I don't. So they're having like this conversation, not selling the product, but then writing all that information down in like lists and trying to book a demo. So if there's like a fit, they will book an online demo with a sales guy. These people, they get 100 DK an hour and they get 100 DK for a meeting. So the price of a demo is this week 250 DK, 220 DK or something. If you want this to succeed, you need a team, a head of the team who does this himself, who's very operational, who sits down with the phone and talks for a couple of hours a day. And you need to really be able to motivate people because this is real hard work. So you need a lot of competitions, a lot of fun stuff to really give people energy. Else you will never succeed with it. It's quite tough mentally for these people to do it if they sit alone in one room. So you can't hire one guy to do this. You need a team of people, and you need really to build like an atmosphere. So today we broke the record. We booked 32 meeting demos today. So there was like confetti and there was champagne, and now they are out whining and dining on our costs. And you have to do stuff like that. Spend some energy on it. What we do is all the info, all the questions they ask. So these are like the relevant questions for us. They go into a CRM system. We use Pipedrive, and we sync all the data with the Zapier. So all the questions, all the informations we get in the phone, in the dialer. Each time we like close a conversation, save the data, that data goes into our CRM system, so we have it. Which means that if we call 10,000 customers a month, after 10 months, we'll actually have this information on our target list of 100,000 people. So over time, we'll be much more efficient because we don't have to call the same companies again asking the same questions. We will be more and more targeted. And we also often get their email and actually permission to put them on our email list. Then we have key account managers who are like a bit more mature than the SDRs. They work full-time. They may have but they have maybe 25,000 DK base salary. They get 10% to 15% of what they're selling. So they will earn 25 to 30, 40,000 DK a month. In our case, we're looking for people who have a couple of years experience with sale, but telemarketing-based sales. It's one thing we learned there when hiring salespeople is that if you go out and you find a really experienced B2B sales key account manager, and then you expect him to go and sit down and have this amount of phone-based meetings a day, he will not perform in that role. You really need to find people who have done stuff like this before. And in sales, you can never take a sales guy and put him one step down. So if you have been out being on the road, selling large deals, you can never basically go back to transaction-based high-activity sales. So if the perfect guy who has sold for trillions at Oracle would call me asking, could I be key account in Likvido, I would always say no, because he's definitely overqualified and he would never be hungry and have success in this role. So it's really about finding people where to work in your company is like a step up for them. because then they are motivated and hungry. But you can see, so we have 8 people who are booking demos, and then we have 3 people, now 4 people, having these demos. It works, so this color is Yannick, and this color is Jacob, and as you see, they have plenty of demos where they then onboard customers. And we do everything inside. There's no, as Nicolaj briefly mentioned, in the price area where we sell our product, our lifetime value is not, it's a couple of €1,000. So there's no business case of driving out, having physical meetings with people. So it has really to be a smooth process. But actually, and it's quite surprising for us, the acquisition cost of doing this, actually calling people, onboarding them on the phone, is roughly €450, which is quite cheap if you compare it to most online things for this segment. And it's scalable. We can always double the amount of input into this model. You have to measure everything. So we measure all KPIs. And how do we do that? We do that by having our Pipedrive, a CRM system. And this is the very basic version. You can measure much more. But what we do is each time a deal is created here, it gets like a source. So there's a source, telemarketing, and you can see that Thea has booked that demo. And then it goes into a Pipedrive where I can see different stages. And then I can export that into Excel. And then I can see we had 100 demos. Where did they came from, or where did they come from? What was like the source who booked the demo? And these sources, they also include, they signed up for a free trial on the website. They converted directly on Facebook. They did this on AdWords. So I have all the sources. What you can do is actually if you run Facebook lead ads or stuff like that, you can do this much more detailed. So you see here campaign title, ad group, ad title, all these things. If you use Facebook lead ads or LinkedIn lead ads, you can always get all these data into your software. So you do not only get the source, you can get all different things. So ad groups, ad title, stuff like that. And then it's very simple. At the end of the month, we export this, and then we look at, we got 100 leads, where did they come from, and what were like the conversion rates to paying customers. So quite simple, actually, to measure. What is the time? Just to... Time is fine. Perfect. I think I'm just going to dig a bit deeper in this, what it really takes if you want to build a sales department with people. Because the most important thing is actually recruiting the right people to do this job. And that's also the hardest part. You have to build basically a couple of processes if you want to succeed with this. And we're still working on them. One thing is you need to hire the right people. So you need to really build a hiring process. We're still learning that, but it's really about figuring out which is the right sales profile to succeed in that role. Because as mentioned, and that formula is very different from all companies. So you really have to be systematic, do it with a structured process where you look at the people you have, and you look at, now we have 4 salespeople. And some of them are great. We have 4 in sales, and we have 8 in booking demos. And then we look at, okay, out of the 8, there are 2 who are really good, and there are 2 who are not that good. Which are like the characteristic of the 2 people who are really good, and what are the characteristic of the people who are not really good in that role? And then we really try to figure out, so exactly the same as we did with customers. Actually exactly the same as we do here, where we try to define like who's the ideal customer profile. You have to do exactly the same with salespeople and really structure that work. You could say that you actually have to build two functions. You have to build a marketing function that works on customers, and then you can apply exactly the same process on your recruiting function, because you need to hire a lot of people, and it's basically the same process as marketing. So it's really about defining who is the perfect customer. Next thing is you need to build, not the perfect customer, the perfect employee. Next thing then is that you need to build a training program, because these people, they typically don't know anything about your product. Maybe they have worked with sales before, and that takes a lot of time. We had a lot of success with actually building e-learning, because for the first couple of months, each time there came a new employee, I would spend hours or days explaining the same things. So I would sit down with him in a meeting room and draw all our processes. And I would sit with him and which questions should we ask customers? And I would sit down and show him our solution. And after I've did that 10 times or something, because most 50% of these salespeople, they actually churn like customers. They are not the right fit. So after a couple of times, you get tired of saying the same things again and again and again. Then I spend one weekend from all day, 2 days, basically trying to figure out, combining all the stuff I've said before, all my PowerPoints, all my article stuff like that, and build a very structured e-learning training program for them, which really helps because now when people start, there is a very structured process. Before they get on the phone, they have to see these videos, read this text, do this test. Then they sit down in a group and they talk about it. Then they get the next lesson, and that really helps to have this extremely structured process. Back to this process. So these are basically the tools we're using. It's really about, if you want to build this in an efficient way, to find the right tools, because and to automate things. So I think my favorite tool of them all is actually Zapier, which lets you integrate all these tools together, and then really build like an efficient flow where you don't have to do anything manually. And when you have to do anything manually, like for instance finding emails, then go to Upwork or some of these other sites and outsource it to someone who can do it for €5 an hour. We do that a lot. We have a lot of processes that are not automated yet, and then we find freelancers who can help us with it. Last thing I have here, which is also from the same guy, from Point 9, are some benchmark data, because it's quite interesting actually to see, because you hear so much about your NPS rates or how happy should your customers be, and a lot of you see a lot of numbers. On this blog, they have basically laid out the benchmark numbers they see, which is very, very nice to know. So this is like their benchmark when it comes to NPS, so Net Promoter Score, how happy should your customers be. And they have actually illustrated it for all these different types of animals, because it's quite different how happy these different animals should be in their natural state. So you can see here, if you're hunting rabbits, for instance, you should have an NPS of 25 to 30, regarding, or if you want to make Point 9 happy. But this is quite helpful actually to know. And the same, they published the same here for churn rates, because you have no idea in the beginning if your churn rate is good or bad. So it's quite helpful. And what you always see with SMEs is that the churn will always be higher. We sell to small companies and we help them with managing liquidity, and they come to us if most often they have like a pain with liquidity. And some of them succeed because they use our tool and they do something, but some of them also go bankrupt. So we actually have a natural churn rate of maybe 0.51% a month of these companies just going out of business. Also, if you have a company with 2 employees and you retire, then the company closes. So in small companies, you will always have a pretty high natural churn rate because these companies are just going out of business. So that's one of the main reasons that the churn rate will always be higher for small companies. Then you have the payback period. So how long does it take you to get your cash back? In our case, as mentioned, we spend approximately 450 euros on acquisition cost. And that includes the marketing part, that includes the SDR, the sales representative, booking the demo, and that includes the salaries for the sales guy. So that's 450 euros. And then we charge €80 monthly subscription, and we convert 15, 18, 20%, as it shifts a bit, to paying customers. So in that case, it will take 6 to 12 months before we actually recover our acquisition cost. But what we do is that we charge them 1 year upfront. So our customers pay us the whole subscription period, which typically is 12 months, in advance, which really helps because then you can actually pay back, not in your accounting software and stuff like that, but in your bank statement. We spend 450 euros in the first month, and then in the second month we send them an invoice of 800 euros, and then we have cash on hand actually to hire more salespeople and to acquire more customers. And that's really nice if you can build a model where you have a positive cash flow in your sales process, because then you're not that dependent on raising a lot of capital. You can be much more cash efficient when you grow. So that's what we try to do. And then in the end, you have the ratio actually between what you spend on marketing and the lifetime value you have on customers. And this is often when you start, you think that you're selling like a software product. So your margins will be 99%, or you have some hosting fees. Then you figure out, okay, but we actually need a customer success department. These customers are not serving themselves. And that's one of the areas we are working on a lot right now, is now we're getting all these customers, and that's great, but now we really have to build structured processes, because we can't afford to spend 10 hours a month with each customer. It really has to be self-service. And that's like then the next bottleneck. Now you have a lot of customers. Now you really need to build a product that is self-service and where you really optimize not spending too much time on all customers. Because else your lifetime value can become negative if you spend too much time on actually serving these companies. It doesn't make any meaning. I think we spend 15 to 20% on customer success and maintaining customers. So we have an 80% margin or something on our customers. That's it.